Hi students, for today's HBL lesson, I would like you to do two things. I would like you to first watch this video and to make sure that you take down notes so that you better understand how to approach mixed genre essay questions. And the second part I'll be sharing with you on Google Classroom, so please make sure you read the instructions carefully. So this here, it would be under the booklet that you have been given on Monday itself. So for this booklet, we are looking at part 2 first, and then we'll move back and look at part 1. Okay, so you can flip through your booklet and you can look for this page here. It should be on the 6th or 7th page. Okay, so look out for this so that we can better understand how mixed genre essays are phrased first before I show you some of the language features. So let's look at the essay question types that you are familiar with. So essay questions that you are familiar with that you have attempted in primary school or in lower secondary are the recount essay questions, the descriptive essay questions, as well as the expository essay questions. So what exactly are these? The recount essay questions would be something like your narrative essay, something that you have to recount, something that happened to you, something you had experienced. So you write it from a first person perspective, you tell it using past tense. So that's your recount essay, personal recount essays. The second one would be your descriptive essays, which you have learned how to do last year as well. So descriptive essays require you to give a very vivid description of a place, a person, or an experience, right? So it can be a very in-depth description of the topic that you are given. So for instance, the example that you're given here, to describe a famous place that you have visited, so you can describe it using your 5 senses. For example, what you smell when you're there. For example, if it's a wet market, how does that place smell? What kind of things do you see at a wet market? What kind of sounds do you hear in the background? What kind of conversations that you hear? It can also be about the sensation. So for example, going through a wet market, is it what kind of things you can feel, okay, or perhaps something that you can taste while you're at that place. Alright, so descriptive essays require you to really go in depth to give a very clear description of the location that you're at or the experience that you have gone through. Now the last one is what we have been doing a lot in secondary school, which is your expository writing, which is your discursive writing. So basically this requires you to state and explain your views about given issue. You can write about solutions, you can write about strategies, you can write about problems, you can write about advantages and disadvantages as well. So these are the main 3. So when you see the word mixed genre essays, basically it's telling you that we are mixing 2 components together and you're supposed to write an essay that addresses both equally, both in a balanced way. So let me show you some examples. Okay, so what exactly is a mixed genre essay? Please write this down. So this mixed genre essay requires you to look at the essay topic that is a hybrid text. You have to give both the descriptive component and the expository component, or the recount component and the expository component. So there are 2 examples that are I realize that the example may not be given in your handout, so please write this down for you to better understand how this question is how this question can be analyzed. Okay, so there's a component where you're supposed to describe the first part of the topic. The second one is where you have to explain. So you have to make sure, very very importantly, to address both equally to fulfill your task fulfillment. So in the event that you only address maybe the descriptive portion, or you only address the expository portion, you will not do well for your task fulfillment because it's not complete. Similarly, if you have only recounted the experience that you remember very vividly from your childhood and you don't explain it well enough, you will not do well for your task fulfillment. Okay, so we are going to take a look at some of the question samples over here. Okay, before I go down, I want you to take some time to write down some of these notes first. So for mixed genre essay, typically out of 4 questions for O levels, you may see at least 1. Some years that there were 2. So it can be a bit more demanding because you're effectively asked to address 2 components of the essay. You must know these 2 components well and address them both well and address them sufficiently for you to do well in terms of task fulfillment. Okay, Then for recount, it's a little bit more straightforward because you are doing a storytelling aspect, right? You follow the flow of the story. There's a climax, there's a conflict, and there's a resolution. Okay, and the emphasis is a little bit less on the description compared to a descriptive essay. So for a descriptive essay, the focus is really on a vivid vocabulary, and for expository essays, you are supposed to explain. So it's similar to your discursive essays. So let me give you an example by looking at the questions below. But maybe before I do that, you pause this video first, you have a quick look, browse through the questions first so that you're not just copying blindly without having some time to do the thinking. Okay, I trust that you have read through the questions, the list of 10 questions, and you have made some predictions to roughly guess what type of questions they are. Let me show you. So you can see here what I've done is I've highlighted components, right? So you can see very clearly which part is an explanation question, which part is the descriptive question, which part is the recount portion of the question. Okay, so you can see that for each of these questions here, the phrasing is quite different, and you can roughly tell which one requires you to explain, only explain, which one requires you to describe a little bit more, which one requires you to recount an experience or recount an event. Okay, let me scroll down further. Right, so there are some similarities in the question types being shown here. I can assure you that when you get your TYS in the future, when you look through, you will see them appearing every year. Okay, so it's quite common for them to ask you to describe a person who has impacted you, quite common for them to ask you to describe something you had experienced previously, be it a memorable event, something that was important to you in your childhood. So that that lesson that we had done recently where I asked you to try to recall something memorable from your childhood, hopefully that triggers a little bit of like a walk down memory lane, helps you to remember a little bit more. Okay, so this here is a short personal reflection. I hope you can write down the answer to this. Were you able to identify patterns when you did the question analysis? Are you able to see a pattern in how the question is being phrased? So if you're able to do that, then that's good because you are a little bit more sensitive to how the question is asked. You are better able to analyze the question without teacher's help. Okay, so at this point over here, I will pause this video and I'll ask you to take a look at the first page of this booklet, and then I'll go through the language features as well as the structure of a mixed genre essay. Okay, so this is the first page of your booklet. Currently, I want you to take a quick look first. So for this component, I'll be going through 3 different samples and I'll show you how it had addressed the descriptive portion of the question, how it has addressed the recount portion of the question, as well as how it has addressed the expository component. Okay, so you will see very clearly how this has been done. So under structure, you will take down some notes to see what is the main focus of the paragraph, and you'll also see some language features to help it to gain the language to gain credit under language. Okay, so under structure, this is where you kind of get your task fulfillment marks. This part is where you kind of get your language marks. All right, and what we do usually is we can take 2 very different approaches. One is the mix and match approach, and one is the integrated approach to structure our essay. Okay, so structure here means how you are going to organize your essay. Just write this first. How do you plan to organize it? So it is good for you to know both, because some questions that are asked, you may choose to take an integrated approach. It may be a bit easier to write, but for some questions it will make a lot more sense to use the mix and match structure. Okay, so let me just show you what I mean. All right, you look at the very first question here, which is asking you to describe an annual event which you have enjoyed. So they didn't say that this is a cultural event, they didn't say that this is a school event, so it's quite open for interpretation. And more importantly is for you to explain why this event means a lot to you. So when you're asked to write about yourself, you have to make sure that you use the correct pronoun. Okay, so in this situation, yes, you're allowed to use the first person pronoun to explain your point of view, to share it in a personal manner. So you can read the different parts of the paragraph. Sometimes I may pose a question to ask you to think a bit further. Could you have improved on the word choices used? Could you have made it a lot more engaging? Could you have made it a lot more eye-catching? Okay, so this is just a sample. I won't say that it is the best sample, but it's good enough for you to get a sensing of how you can approach these questions. So we do have the first part, which is the introduction. Okay, and following that, you will see that the first body paragraph, it is a descriptive paragraph. So in order for you to make sure that you describe the place sufficiently, you give the audience enough sensory details, enough imagery, enough vivid description for me to picture it in my mind's eye. Alright, so this can be how you break down the paragraph. You can copy this part over here. You can see that adjectives are used. You can see that imagery, literary devices are used. You can see that there are sensory details to show you how that location looks like. There are also sensory details to tell you how the smell, the sound, the sight is like. Okay, so if I'm going too fast, you just move back and you pause and you highlight. Alright, I will not pause too much because a long video will take a long time to upload and render. Okay, so if you need to, just pause. Next portion of the essay, you can see that there is an emphasis of the explanation to show why is this event important, and this is done using the PE structure, or you can start with the elaboration first, the example, then the point. But for this particular sample, the sample had used mainly the point and explanation and example kind of structure. Doesn't matter, okay, but it's important that you are clear of the 2 or 3 key reasons. So the key reasons here will be the point. Key reason number 1, key reason number 2. Okay, and very, very, very importantly, you must address both parts of the questions equally. You cannot do a piece of work where it's 70% description and then 30% explanation, because that is quite lopsided. And for an essay like that, you will not do well for task fulfillment because it's not equally addressed. Similarly, let's say you run out of time when you are writing, you focus only on the explanation, you miss out the whole description component, again, you will not do well. You have to address both equally. It cannot be a rushed job. So if both parts must be addressed equally, that means that you really need to do planning. This part is important. Okay, so I cannot emphasize enough the importance of planning your essay before starting to write your essay. Okay, the conclusion can be a simple one with a simple reflection. Usually these questions are quite introspective. Introspective means that it requires you to dig deep a little bit. Think about, is there any values that you have gotten? Is there something that have touched you emotionally? Write about something like that, right? So that will help to round off the entire essay nicely. Okay, so this is one example. Let me show you a second example. Second example is one whereby you're asked to write a recount and an expository. So since this is an event or an incident that you still remember from early childhood, if it's recount, means that it has to be past tense, and because this is your experience, it's about what you had gone through, you can write it in the first person point of view. So again, you continue using the similar structure, right? You have your introduction, and then this first portion, maybe I change this to black. Okay, your story has to be very eye-catching, very engaging. Alright, because this here is your recount component. While I say that it is not as descriptive as a descriptive essay, you must still have the structure of a narrative recount, personal recount. But because you still have to talk about the expository component, you cannot be too long-winded. So you have to ensure that you are not belaboring the point. You cannot be too long-winded about the story. It has to be a very compact anecdote. So this here, you have to tell what exactly happened, but in a very compact way without giving way too much unnecessary details. The flow and the sequence must have sufficient suspense, must have sufficient engagement for the audience. Okay, and because it's a recount, it has to be in the order in which it occurred. So it has to be sequential. It cannot be all over the place. The story must follow the chronological flow. Okay, last part is where you address the expository portion again. You can see that for the mix and match strategy, it is very clear cut. First part is about the recount, second part is about the expository, or first part is the description, the second part is the expository. So there are very, very clear components to the essay. Okay, so you can use the point elaboration example. You can mix this around so that it's a little bit less predictable, is a little bit more engaging. So in this sample, they have given the point followed by explanation, point followed by the elaboration. So a little bit boring, but while you are still starting and you're still figuring out how to write, it's okay to still be a bit boring for class work, but I hope that you take the opportunity to level up. Alright, so this here is an example, and you continue by writing a simple reflection to conclude the entire essay. Now let me show you the third example. The third example is where an integrated approach is being used. So please note down, this is different. So integrated approach means that for each body paragraph, you write both the descriptive component and the expository component. So introduction looks like this, but your body paragraph, you have both components together, so that the whole essay is like one. You basically address one portion of the person, the physical attributes or something about the person, and clearly explain it immediately after. Okay, so for some questions it may be a bit easier to use this approach, it may flow a bit better, so it depends on the question and your planning. Alright, so for this here, the person that has been featured is Emma Watson, so you can already start to use vivid vocabulary and imagery in the description, in the introduction, right? And moving on, because this is about a person, right? Which person is this? Why this person has the greatest influence? You must put in a lot of effort to describe how this person looks like. So the first portion is about the physical attributes. So how does this person look like? Can I identify this person from a crowd? Right? So you can see this first part is the physical attributes component. Then this is the expository component. For me, I would say I would give a little bit more over here, because like I said, it has to be balanced, right? So the description here, for me, I feel that, the explanation here, for me, I should feel that should be a little bit more. Okay, so for me, how I would have approached this, I may talk about, while we look at her physical attributes, I also want to look at whether or not, I can talk about things like beauty standards and things like that. Okay, give a little bit more depth to the discussion. Right? Then the next one is about the intellectual attributes and what this person had done to contribute to society and humanity. So you can see that the green part is the description and the pink part is the expository. To me, I feel it's still a little bit short, but you get the idea how you can approach for this kind of question. Okay, so this here, definitely this particular essay, there's still room for improvement, but I think for a starter, it's helpful enough to give you a sensing of how these two approaches vary from one another. Okay, then one question that I want you to think about is, what do you think can still be featured as the third body paragraph? So far we have 2 key things and 2 explanation, but for a good essay, right, you will try to give at least 3 points, right, so that there's enough scope for discussion also. Okay, so if you were to talk about the third one, what would be featured in the third body paragraph as you describe it and you explain it as one paragraph? What would you feature about a person? Okay, so at this point over here, I hope that after almost 20 minutes you have been taking down notes. I would like to collect your notes on Friday itself, so that when I go through this next week, I can ensure that everybody has the same foundational work done for your understanding of mixed genre essay. Okay, and then please go on to Google Classroom, like I said, to check out what you have to do to prepare yourself for Friday's lesson as well. Okay, so I hope that your HBL lesson, HBL day has been fruitful, and please have a good day. I'll see you again on Friday.